What if I told you that everything you think you know about medieval castle life is completely wrong? Forget the romantic fairy tales and Hollywood movies. The reality behind those massive stone walls was far more complex, surprising, and sometimes downright shocking than you could ever imagine. Welcome to medieval Europe, roughly between 1000 and 1500 AD, when castles dominated the landscape from England to Eastern Europe. These weren't just impressive fortresses. They were bustling communities, political centers, and the beating hearts of feudal society. But life inside these walls was nothing like the glamorous world we see in movies. Let's start with the castle itself. That imposing stone fortress you're picturing? Most castles were actually built from wood and earth. Stone castles were luxury items, affordable only by the wealthiest nobles. Even stone castles weren't the solid, impenetrable fortresses they appeared to be. They were riddled with secret passages, hidden chambers, and architectural tricks designed to confuse invaders. The Great Hall was the castle's nerve center, but it wasn't a place of constant feasting and merriment. During the day, it served as a courthouse, business center, and general meeting place. Tables were literally boards placed on trestles, then dismantled after meals. The lord's family ate on a raised platform called a dais, while servants and lesser nobles sat at lower tables, literally giving us the phrase below the salt. Now let's talk about the people who called these castles home. The lord and lady were at the top, but they weren't lounging around in luxury all day. Medieval nobles worked constantly, managing vast estates, settling disputes, and maintaining complex political relationships. The lady of the castle often ran the entire operation when her husband was away at war, which was frequently. Below them lived a complex hierarchy of people. Knights weren't just noble warriors. Many were essentially middle management, overseeing land and peasants. Squires weren't romantic young heroes in training. They were servants who cleaned armor, maintained weapons, and performed menial tasks. Pages were often children as young as 7, sent away from their families to learn proper behavior and skills. The real backbone of castle life was the army of servants, craftsmen, and workers. A large castle might house 200 to 300 people. There were cooks, bakers, brewers, blacksmiths, carpenters, stable hands, guards, and dozens of others. Each had specific roles and lived in a rigid social structure where everyone knew their place. Let's follow a typical day in a medieval castle, starting before dawn. The day began with the ringing of bells for morning prayers. Everyone, from lord to servant, was expected to attend religious services. Medieval life revolved around Christianity, and the castle chapel was as important as any other room. After prayers came the first meal, but forget everything you think you know about medieval feasts. Breakfast was simple, often just bread and weak ale. Yes, ale. Even children drank it because water was often unsafe. The brewing process killed harmful bacteria, making ale safer than water. Mealtimes revealed fascinating social dynamics. The lord's table received the best cuts of meat, white bread, and imported spices. Lower tables got darker bread, simpler fare, and whatever was left. Food was eaten with fingers and knives. Forks weren't common until the late medieval period. People shared drinking vessels and eating bowls, which sounds unsanitary to us, but was perfectly normal then. Speaking of hygiene, here's where things get interesting. Medieval people weren't as dirty as we imagine. They bathed regularly, though not daily like we do. Castle bathhouses were common, and people understood the importance of cleanliness. However, their methods were different. They used herbs, oils, and even urine for cleaning and medicinal purposes. The castle's private chambers tell another story entirely. The lord's bedroom was often the most secure room in the castle, sometimes built into the strongest tower. Privacy was a luxury few enjoyed. Most people slept in communal areas, sharing beds with strangers. Even noble families often slept together in one room. Winter presented enormous challenges. Castles were freezing cold, despite popular images of cozy fireplaces. Most rooms had no heating at all. People wore multiple layers of clothing and often slept with their animals for warmth. The Great Hall's central fire provided the only significant heat source, and smoke was a constant problem since chimneys were still being perfected. Entertainment in castles was more sophisticated than you might expect. Nobles employed musicians, storytellers, and jesters. They played complex games like chess and backgammon. Hunting was both sport and necessity, providing fresh meat and training for warfare. Tournaments and jousting were real, but they were deadly serious competitions, not romantic spectacles. Women in castles had more power and responsibility than popular culture suggests. Noble women managed households, oversaw finances, and made important decisions. They were educated, often more literate than men. Some became powerful political figures in their own right. However, they also faced constant dangers from childbirth, disease, and political marriages arranged without their consent. The castle's defenses reveal medieval military genius. Spiral staircases were built clockwise, favoring right-handed defenders fighting downward. Murder holes allowed defenders to pour boiling oil or water on attackers. False doors led to dead ends or traps. The castle's layout was designed to confuse and delay invaders at every turn. Castle toilets, called garderobes, were surprisingly advanced. They were built into exterior walls with chutes leading to moats or pits below. Some castles had multiple levels of toilets sharing the same chute. The smell was managed by hanging clothes nearby, as the ammonia from waste actually helped preserve fabric and repel insects. Diseases and medical care in castles were constant concerns. Medieval medicine combined practical knowledge with superstition. Castle physicians used herbs, bloodletting, and prayer to treat illness. Surprisingly, some treatments were effective. Willow bark contained aspirin-like compounds, and honey was used as an antibiotic. The economic life of castles was incredibly complex. They were self-sufficient communities, producing everything from food to weapons. The castle's workshops, stables, and storage areas were as important as its defensive walls. Trade networks connected castles across Europe, bringing exotic goods, news, and cultural exchange. As we peer behind these medieval walls, we discover that castle life was neither the romantic fantasy nor the primitive existence we often imagine. It was a sophisticated, challenging, and surprisingly modern world where people loved, worked, fought, and dreamed, much like we do today. These massive stone monuments weren't just military fortresses. They were communities where the foundations of our modern world were being built, one stone at a time.